Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler. I run the How to D&D YouTube channel. And basically this is a Lost Mine of Phandelver Dungeon Master tutorial. This covers Lesson 8, The Ruins of Thundertree. I have deliberately put this class at the end of the presentation because I actually believe this adventure, or this location, should I say, should be its own adventure. And I've also presented you with a lot of the stuff that you without any changes as well. So it's trying to do two things, but I've deliberately put it at the end because I feel like its usefulness in your adventure is really down to making it your own rather than running it as is written in the adventure book. But if you don't want that, you will ignore me, because anything that I say you can ignore, because that's the whole point. So as I said, a Dungeon Master guide on the Lost Mine of Phandelver. We are going to be covering finding the ruins of Thundertree. There's quite a few different ways you can find the ruins of Thundertree. It's actually not very difficult. Role-playing some of the monsters, zombies, twig blights, the cultists, the Druid. There is a dragon here, Venom Fang. So we're going to have to talk about that. Exploring the ruins of Thundertree and sort of how to defeat or deal with the monsters that populate the area. The primary goal here is to defeat a dragon. Now, that's no big ask. I mean, seriously, dragons are supposed to be tough. Now, like all of my classes, we're going to be going through the explanation period. There will be some demonstration taking place as well. And then there's at the end of the session, the second half of the session will actually consist of a practical playthrough for those of you who want to. If you have a webcam or a microphone, you don't have to have both. You might have just a webcam and a microphone, or you might just have a microphone and want to do it just verbally. That's fine too. Just bear in mind that you guys have to decide what level you will be for the second half of this presentation, not me. Okay, I think it's much more sensible that the players make the decision about when they are going to do this rather than anybody else. And I will say again, you will find that there is a link to the free version, the online resources on D&D Beyond. You can now get the Lost Mine of Phandelver for no price whatsoever. It won't cost you a thing whatsoever. So feel free to go and access all of the resources. You get all of the adventures, you get all of the monsters. You can access them on D&D Beyond, all their stat blocks. You can also get all of the high resolution maps, and I highly recommend going and grabbing those resources rather than coughing out a whole lot of money on a virtual tabletop if you're going to be using one, because you won't need to, frankly. Okay, the first thing that we need to deal with is finding the ruins of Thundertree. And it's actually not that difficult, but there's a couple of ways that the players might get there should they decide to go there. And I want to make it clear that if it wasn't obvious, Thundertree is actually not really a secret. I mean, the location of this place is not actually held in secret in any way. So that means it's entirely possible for the players to find this location pretty easy, or go there if they decided to do so. Even if they are unaware that there is monsters and a dragon there. So the first thing is you'll find that the folk hero fighter background has parents who lived in the village of Thundertree, which now has a lot of monsters there. That particular pre-made character that comes in the starter box set actually has this tied in as a backstory and a goal for that character, of all things. So apparently you're going to be going there and dealing with some monsters and a dragon residing in the ruins now. There's no time frame on this. It's not like the goal is stipulated, you must do it at level 1 or 2 or 3. So it's entirely possible that you'll get a player who's smart enough to do it at level 5. Now, if they don't, I would encourage them to do so, okay? Because I still want dragons to be deadly and dangerous in your game, but I don't want players to find out the horrible way just because they're completely unaware that they're not playing a video game that is specifically tailored for their skill level. There's also Mirana Dendra, you'll find Mirana in the slave pens in the Red Brand hideout. She can offer a reward in the form of a hidden location to a necklace to the player's characters, so they can go and claim it. And of course, that means they have to go to the ruins of Thundertree, and she actually gives them directions and the exact location of the necklace, so they don't have to try and search for it. They can just go and find it easily. There's also Quillen Elderleaf, who can suggest just visiting Rudolph. I mean, is it Rudolph or Redolph? I mean, is it Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer? This is a druid who resides at the ruins of Thundertree. He provides information on the location or any location they might be trying to look for. And that's the only reason to go there, is that, oh, you go and ask the druid because they potentially know the location of anywhere you might want to go in the adventure. So there's another way to get there. As I said, the ruins of Thundertree is not in fact a secret. It's just that people don't venture there because it's a rather dangerous location to go, and you don't usually go wandering into dangerous locations, right? Well, not the normal individuals within this world. The simplest way to encourage your player characters to seek out the ruins of Thundertree, if you are unsure and didn't know how to go about doing that without sort of forcing them down that route, is to have Venomfang the dragon attack Phandelver. That's the simplest way. Make sure the player's characters are in Phandelver, the dragon attacks, carries off, say, a small farm animal like some sheep or one sheep for food, and then it flies away. Goes back home, they follow the direction the dragon is flying, and they wind up in the ruins of Thundertree. It is probably the easiest way to indicate that the dragon is actually a threat, because right now the dragon is not really a threat, it's just hiding out. And so there's no sort of big push to go and do anything with it. So I just wanted to point that out for those of you who are wondering, like, how do I do something with this if I want to do anything at all? Okay, now I guess the biggest problem with each of these locations is they're not necessarily hugely important, frankly, because there's not a lot going for any of them. So I'm going to break these down fairly quickly. So location 1, which is over here, you'll notice I've laid out a lot of miniatures and dice. So I just want to move this out of the way so you can see. So all of the miniatures, to make it clear, all the miniatures that you see indicates how many monsters are in that location. Okay, so there's quite a lot. And any dice that you see, any 6-sided dice that are lying on the map, all these ones here, these indicate these are more monsters, and there's more over here. So you can see that even though this is not to scale, there's a lot of monsters in a very tightly packed location. Yet again, this tends to happen with this adventure. Okay, the first location, this is the westernmost cottage. You just read out or paraphrase the box text when the players get here, ask them what they want to do. There are, in fact, 2 twig blights in this location which are hiding. They're not going to approach the players' characters. If they are discovered, they're more likely to run away rather than to attack. Frankly, they are probably not going to do very much. They're more likely, as I said, to run away. The twig blight is a really boring monster. And I can't reiterate just how boring a monster it is. It is like, why did the Dungeon Master team decided that the twig blight should make a major appearance in this location? Because it doesn't really do anything. It is the least favorite of all of the monsters that I can think of that I have ever used in any game. And when I used them in my game, it was not great. It's simply, they are boring to fight, even with a large group of them. So if the players' characters are even, if it looks like they're even cutting their way through these monsters or cutting them apart really quickly, you might want to just remove them completely from the entire adventure location, because they are so easy to deal with, even in large numbers, say numbers of 6 or 8. It doesn't make any difference, particularly if you're dealing with characters who are probably like level 2, 3, or if they're dealing with level 4 or 5 characters, which this is the best time to be coming to this location, is when you're level 4 or 5, preferably 5, frankly. These twig blights will avoid the party and flee if needed. This is what I would suggest to you. It's totally up to you what you do with this. Then we have area 2, which is the Blighted Cottage. The Blighted Cottage is just next to area 1. It isn't actually a particularly interesting location. Again, it's just a ruined cottage of some kind. There's a bunch of creatures here. There's about 6 of them. I'm going to provide you with suggestions on what to do with twig blights, Ian, so you don't need to worry about that. It's coming near the end. I have prepared something for that very purpose. So read out or paraphrase the box text when they reach this area, and then ask the players what they want to do. If the player characters have the ability to speak with plants, or the spell. Some character classes have the ability to actually talk with a plant of some kind, which is kind of useful in this situation. And if they do, and they want to utilize it, don't block them on that one. I would absolutely encourage them to do something like that. What I'm going to say, though, is that even when you ask them what to do and trying to speak with plants, they're still going to have to do a little bit of work. So whether it's the spell or a special ability, which you will find the spell on page 277 of the player's handbook. If you're unsure how it works, check that out, please. There's a chance they might discover the creatures are actually hungry. If they actually talk to the plants and ask them, and get into a conversation rather than a battle, there's time to talk, great. If they manage to do that, great. If they find out the creatures are hungry and then just offer them food to avoid getting into a battle, then let them do that. Okay, don't worry about anything like dice rolls or something like that. If feeding the plant creatures means you don't have to deal with fighting them. There's no real effective way to employ a twig blight in combat, as you may have discovered when looking at the stat block, because it's very basic. But generally, don't fight to the death. Twig blights don't generally fight to the death, even though the adventure says this. They usually flee if necessary. So as soon as they start taking damage, they're going to run away. The most effective way to deal with a twig blight is to wave a flaming torch at them, or to use like light a fire or use fire spells, as this generally scares them off straight away. They are vulnerable to fire. They know this. So therefore, fire is the thing you want to use to get rid of them, rather than trying to hack your way through all their hit points, which they don't have that many of anyway. If the player characters search the cottage, allow them to find the old chest without a perception check, because it's a very easy check. It's only a DC 10. I've said this before. Don't worry about DC 5s and 10s. They're a waste of your time. You have better things to do with your time than to be mucking around with something like that. Now, area 3, which you'll find is over here. I have placed 4 ash zombies over here. Now, remember, these cottages are actually twice the size, because remember, each square is 10 foot. So that means that you're actually looking at not a 10 foot by 10 foot room. You're looking at a 20 foot by 20 foot room. But even so, with a group of players, there's not a lot of room to actually do very much. I found this to be the case when I drew it out to scale. Maneuvering is difficult. There's a lot of funneling going on, and ash zombies are slightly more interesting than your standard zombie. Only just, provided you use them a particular way. And as it happens, you can now access the ash zombie. It's full stat, without worrying about sidebars and so forth, on D&D Beyond, and it's for free. So area 3, the Brown House, which is basically a brewery or an old brewery, an old brewer's house. Read out or paraphrase the box text when you get here. Ask the players what they want to do. The most effective way to employ or use the ash zombie is to have them attack multiple player characters in melee. You want to get up close. And the reason to do this is to benefit from the ash puff ability as much as possible. The more that they engage with different targets, the more likely that ability will trigger and therefore affect more than one individual. If you throw all of the zombies at one player character, more than likely that only one player character will be affected, because the range on it is really, really short. It's like 5 feet. It's not great. So that's what I would suggest. If you get the opportunity, engage more than one target. The best way to deal with an ash zombie tends to be the same thing that you would do with any kind of zombie, and that is the turn undead abilities. Destroying them with a paladin smite will certainly be very effective. Keeping your distance. I mean, you could say the same thing of any zombie, but particularly these, because of the ash that they throw out, you want to keep your distance if possible, rather than get up close to them. And then the other thing is that Sacred Flame cantrip. Now, the Sacred Flame cantrip is renowned for missing things, but it is the perfect tool for this location. And frankly, I would suggest encouraging your players to use it when they start asking questions. It's designed specifically for that kind of monster. More than any other monster and that is available in Dungeons and Dragons 5e, that is the one that you're probably going to find is going to be the most useful. Now, The next area is area 4. Now, area 4 is over here, and you'll notice there's nothing in here. It is more well kept. It is reinforced. It will basically be the perfect location for doing a lot of different things here. But read out or paraphrase the box text when the players get here. Ask the players what they want to do. Role-playing Rudolph the Druid is on page 31 to 32 of the adventure, or you could just play him as a friendly, helpful hippie, such as somebody like Jimi Hendrix, if you know what Jimi Hendrix is like, or if you don't like the idea of Jimi Hendrix, but I felt like Jimi Hendrix was probably the best choice in this case. There's another individual or a couple other individuals that I would suggest, because I feel like a hippie is probably the right one. This is the info dump character, by the way, but is also supposed to be hugely friendly and helpful. So I was thinking Bob Marley or Bob Dylan. They were all sort of hippies in that age. Even Janis Joplin, for those of you who know. If you don't know any of those particular artists from history, then I would suggest pick one that is sort of hippie-like. Modern environmentalists are just too aggressive for this character, frankly. So I wouldn't tailor it on that if I were you. Now, the small house is intended to be a safe haven for the player's characters to take a short rest or a long rest when required, but it's not a safe haven from a dragon. So if they get the attention of the dragon, or you decide that the dragon gets knows that they are here, this may not well be a safe location to be. So if they wind up having an altercation with the dragon, then run away and decide they're going to rest here, probably a really bad idea. But if they just come here and are dealing with the other monsters but don't disturb the dragon, then resting here, long rest or short rest, should be fine. This is what this location is designed for. But in any case, it's not that difficult for them to simply leave the area, go somewhere else, and proceed on without too many problems. So that would be my suggestion to you. I know it sounds strange. Play the character like Jimi Hendrix, but seriously, I think that's probably the right one to pick. Okay, so area 5, which if I can remember where that little sucker is, I think it's pretty small. It's here. This little location is a bit of a mess, frankly. Area 5 is the Blighted Farmhouse. Read out or paraphrase the box text when they get here. Ask the players what they want to do. Look, I'm just going to refer you back to my previous recommendations on twig blights for area 2. That's the Blighted Cottage. Just use the same advice that I used there. The only difference is that these twig blights are hungrier, so you probably it's potentially going to be more of an issue rather than the first location they were dealing with. But yeah, I would suggest just use the same advice that I used before. Area 6, which is over here. This is where these spiders are. Sort of like it's a farmhouse basically. This area is the ruined store. So read out or paraphrase the box text and ask the players what they want to do when they get here. Now, when you're dealing with spiders, I find that most people are unsure or aren't familiar with the use of the giant spider in Dungeons and Dragons. And possibly the reason is that they haven't considered how a real spider operates. It's actually a no-brainer. You actually understand how to do this, but I will explain it. The best way to deal with the webs in this area is to burn them away with a torch or another source of fire. The light cantrip won't do it. You need to have fire. And this is probably the best way to avoid having to move through them, because it's difficult to move through the webbing. It's stipulated in the adventure. I recommend, if the player's characters attempt to push or move their way through the webbing, I want you to either ignore the DC 10 strength or athletics check because it's so easy, or increase the DC to 12. Otherwise, it's rather easy to actually succeed on this. The reason I've selected 12 rather than some other number is that is the DC for breaking the webbing if you wind up getting caught up in it. So I'm just using that DC in this case. The most effective way to employ or use your giant spider is to have them use the web ability from the ceiling if you can. Now, not the entire ceiling has not rotted or been decayed. There is parts of the ceiling still intact. or on the walls, high on the walls. Use the web ability to snare up the player's characters first. Once the characters have been webbed up, they then move in to bite and feed on their prey. They would not move in until they have webbed up their target. That's not how a spider works. The first job is to ensure that their meal is unable to resist them. And that means focusing on the web ability. The best way to deal with a giant spider for the player's characters is to avoid getting webbed, obviously. Burning the webs away completely before entering the location, or using some sort of area effect fire spell in particular, but area effect spells are good. A fire spell that's area affecting is Burning Hands. It's probably the most effective way of dealing with the giant spiders in this location. And since there's only two, you're capable of catching both in the fire if you wanted to. You'll find the Burning Hands spell on page 220 of the player's handbook. I think you'll find that it's most likely going to be the thing of choice for most players when they are playing the game, is they'll use their Burning Hands. Okay, next, Area 7, which is the big mother. This is where everything happens, right? Area 7 is where the dragon is. Like all dragons, they should be played so that they are dangerous. When you play a dragon as a monster that is just another collection of hit points to rack up, you are taking something away from the game. All of us who have played the game before have had to deal with dying from a dragon, or at least running from a dragon is quite common too. I would suggest read out or paraphrase the box text and ask the players what they want to do. Now, you may not even get to the building itself, because I do have some recommendations for this. I recommend ignoring the adventure advice on the dragon. The advice they provide on the dragon is garbage. And I find that when I follow that advice, it never worked for me. I don't expect it will work for you. It's possible, but I don't think it will. Role-playing Venomfang, the young green dragon, is on page 32 of the adventure. There's also a video on my YouTube channel, or you can just play the dragon as a manipulative schemer, because that is what a green dragon is. They are much more at peace scheming and deceiving somebody else. So it would be foolish for the player characters to try to do that to the dragon, because it's probably not going to work. The most effective way to employ your dragon, Venomfang, is to make sure it is on the roof of the tower, keeping an eye on their surroundings. Or if it's not on the roof of the tower, there are birds in the area that act as sentries that warn the dragon, so it's not sleeping inside the tower. The worst thing you can do is have this dragon sleeping inside the tower. I think this dragon is on the run. Therefore, it makes sense that this dragon would be on alert rather than being considering this a place where it can just settle down and sleep for the next couple of decades. It's not likely to be doing that sort of thing. So I would suggest, since this is a new dragon and a new location, it would probably be taking many more precautions to ensure its own safety. And I suspect that a larger dragon has driven it from its home. Okay. If the player characters approach the dragon without declaring their presence, it can fly above using its poison breath. I would say just have it attack. If they don't, if the player's characters start moving towards this tower and the dragon's there and knows they're coming, hopefully it should be, then just use the poison breath, fly overhead. When you're waiting for the poison breath to recharge, this is where you fly overhead and grab a player's character, fly them up into the air and drop them to their death. I know that sounds terrible, but seriously, that's how a dragon should operate. Or you're going to make flyby attacks, but never let the dragon fight on the ground. And you're always going to be, because dragons are smart, they're always going to go after the softer, squishy ones, because it makes more sense than going for the ones that are covered in armor, okay? If the player characters declare their presence and intentions, the dragon could be bribed or bargained with, or even deceived with the right approach. But intimidating a dragon like this will just lead to it attacking the player's characters. Now, what would you bargain with this particular dragon? Well, Venomfang values treasures like favors, that the dragon, particularly when it has control over somebody else, and somebody of power, somebody of renown, somebody who's a hero, somebody who has knowledge and magic, anything like somebody important, and the player's characters that are important enough, they will do. So a favor with the dragon certainly could be used as a form of negotiation. Now, what sort of treasures can you give this dragon that it would be actually interested in? Well, apparently emeralds are highly praised, wood carvings, of all things, musical instruments, goodbye to your musical instrument bards. And if you've got somebody who has wood carving skills, then maybe they can carve something or have something already carved. Sculptures of humanoids. Now, I know this seems rather bizarre. There's a couple here, well, at least one that they probably might have. My advice is read up on green dragons on page 95 of the Monster Manual. Now, a young green dragon will likely TPK, which is total party kill. That means kill every player character. It's very, very likely, or at least kill some of the characters if they are level 4 or lower. So if you have your group going to this location, facing the dragon, and they are level 4 or lower, they're probably going to die. But if the player characters are level 5, they will be fine if they use good tactics and are lucky. Good tactics will be important, but also ensuring they have good dice rolls will also be important. Dragons work best in a game when the players, so you need to have a talk with your players. You need, as a dungeon master, to understand and accept that failure and death is very likely with a dragon, because it is meant to be a big deal. So if you and your players can accept that this encounter, if they choose to take it on, is likely to end their character, you're all good. If you have players who do not like that idea and they're expecting you to pull your punches, then you should be telling them you probably can't survive this. And there's nothing wrong as a dungeon master, particularly when you're dealing with new people, to explain to them you're dealing with a dragon. Your character is quite possibly going to die. I think it's very, very likely, so that they understand the importance of what they do at this point. It will be up to them ultimately what happens. Okay, so that is the dragon. There are a couple of other areas in here that are important. I have tried to construct a list of different things that you'll find useful for them. I just need to have some water. So the first rather odd location is area, I believe it's area 8. Okay. Area 8, again, it's the old Smithy. Read out or paraphrase the box text when the players get here. Ask them what they want to do. I refer to my previous recommendations on the Ash Zombies from Area 3, the Brown House. I would consider allowing the players' characters to claim some of the old tools left behind that the adventure talks about, such as now I've specifically worked out the numbers on this, and I've worked out the types of tools because I did a lot of research on smithing. I know this sounds ridiculous. Level 4, no, not level 4. So 4 tongs, you need about 4 tongs for smithing properly. 4 different sized forging hammers, they have different purposes. There's 2 anvils. There's 2 whetstones, because you never have 1 whetstone. You always have 2. Now, the reason being is that sometimes they break and you can't afford to not have a whetstone. It's used so often. 4 different sized chisels from small to large. 3 punches for putting a hole through metal or bars of metal or sheet metal. And then 2 cone mandrels. Now, a cone mandrel, for those who don't know what that is it's basically a cone made out of metal that is used to bend stuff over. And that's really what its purpose is. There's also an anvil tool or a forging tool, which I knew I couldn't include in here because it's too hard to explain. And I was struggling to understand what the heck it was myself. So I gave up in the end. Okay, now area 9 is the Herbalist shop. Read out or paraphrase the box text here. ask the players what they want to do. There is a gold necklace. It is covered extensively in the adventure. There's not a lot I can add to this, but I will add this. The piece of jewelry, that necklace, could be used by the players' characters to go and ask another question of Agatha the Banshee if they've already been to Coneybury. So they could use that piece of jewelry to ask an additional question of if they've already asked the question that Sister Gorell had asked them to present. And of course, they can only get one answer from the Banshee for everything they bring. So this is one piece of jewelry which is worth enough that the Banshee would probably value. So for those of you who are wondering, like, how can the players go back and ask Agatha some more questions, this may well be the way to do that. And if the players suggest it, I would go with it, because I think it's a very smart use of an item within the game, which isn't necessarily just more money. Right. Area 10. Where is Area 10? With my eyes. Yeah, here we go. Area 10's way over here. There's not really supposed to be very much going on here. Read out or paraphrase the box text. Ask the players what they want to do. I found nothing on Palian, the hero, on the internet. That was in the basically everything on that hero. The statue in the middle is on a famous hero for this location, who protected this location from monsters. And everything that I could find on the internet was exactly the same information that's in. I know a lot of people like to sort of talk about pushing the statue over on the dragon, but no, that's ridiculous, because your dragon should not be on the ground. It'll be flying above the statue. So I'm not going to give you that advice, because frankly, I think that's ridiculous. Next. Area 11, the old garrison. So the town square is done. The old garrison. Read out or paraphrase the box text for this location. Ask the players what they want to do. Refer to the previous recommendations I gave on the ash zombies from Area 3 in the Browning house. Same sort of thing. There's a lot more ash zombies here. I'm not going to suggest that you need to worry too much about ash zombies, frankly. And I never found zombies to be particularly dangerous unless you have a very small group and they're very low level. Other than that, they just don't do enough damage. You know, on average, their attack does like 4 damage, and their ability to hit the target is very poor as well. And they're very easy to hit because their armor class is so it's rubbish. Okay, next, Area 12, which is here. The dice represent a whole lot of twig blights. Remember, dice represent monsters, and there's twig blights over here as well, but all the dice just represent twig blights. I just don't have enough to actually show you all of them all the time. The Weaver's Cottage, a little bit interesting, not completely. I would say that there's only so much I can add to this without you going through the process of making major changes, because there's not a lot to this location, frankly. And it's one of the reasons I think a lot of people do not give advice on, because there's not a lot you can actually add to it. So that means we're going to have to talk a lot more about what you can do after. So Area 12, which is the Weaver's Cottage, read out or paraphrase the box text, ask the players what they want to do. The broken loom in the corner of the room is the only thing that I thought I could add something to for you. It could be repaired. You could use the mending spell, which is a cantrip. You may have a player who has access to that. Or if a player character has proficiency in carpenter's tools, and the tools don't require a skill check, they could repair it. The loom could be used by the characters or another character, or it could be sold for, say, 10 to 20 gold pieces in its current condition, provided it has been repaired. If it hasn't been repaired, it's probably worth nothing. Okay, the final location, which is Area 13. This is where we're dealing with cultists, or the dragon cultists. I am not fond of the dragon cultists. I think every time anybody's ever mentioned anything about dragon cultists and what to do with them, it's always made things far more complicated than it needed to be. And I would say feel free to just make this a role-play encounter, or even just remove it completely. I think it's really trying to push the adventure in the direction of Horde of the Dragon Queen, or the Tyranny of Dragons storyline that was being released about the same time or just after the starter set. It got released, I think, a couple of months after the starter set for Dungeons & Dragons 5e, the original one, was released, that had the Lost Mine of Phandelver in it. So read out or paraphrase the box text, ask the players what they want to do. The cultists are hiding in the farmhouse, so I suggest using a contest between their stealth check, which will be a +1 to a d20 dice roll. And if that's for the cultists, that's their stealth check. You do one check and you compare it to the players' characters who are listening at the door, and they're going to make a perception check. Now, they may hear movement. You might describe you can hear movement or whispering voices. That's probably the best they're going to get out of it if they are successful, because I would have the cultists actively trying to hide their presence here. Now, normally with a contest, to be successful, they have to get greater than the stealth check, because it's not a DC in this case, it's a contest. With a contest, you need to get greater than the actual value. So whatever the stealth check is for the cultists, the players have to have a score higher than that. Now, role-playing the cultists and fabric is on page 34 to 35. I'm going to suggest just playing fabric like a telemarketing salesperson. You know those really annoying people that always sound like they're super happy and generally want to sell you something, but you know they're full of shit? That's the sort of person I think fabric is. The intention of the designers is to have the cultists in this location connect the adventure Lost Mine of Phandelver to the Tyranny of Storylines and Tyranny of Dragons storyline. But it actually offers no advice on how to do that, by the way. If you wanted to connect the two adventures, here's my suggestion. If you're going to be doing this, if you decide to run the Lost Mine of Phandelver and then you want to transition into the Horde of the Dragon Queen, these are the episodes I would run, and then skip everything else. Run episode 1 and 2. So Greenest in Flames and the Raiders Camp, which is episode 2. Then run episode 7, because it leads you into episode 8, and episode 8 is awesome and probably the best thing about that adventure, and the rest of it, who cares? You would rename the town or village of Greenest to Phandalin and give Phandalin a castle if you're going to do this. That's the sort of change that I would suggest making if you're going to do anything with transitioning from the Lost Mine of Phandelver into Horde of the Dragon Queen. I do not have any more advice for you when dealing with the Rise of Tiamat or the second half of that adventure. Primarily because I don't think that many people are going to be doing that anyway. Okay, some points, a lot of the things that you may be wanting to know more about. This is where I'm going to cover it now. I have 6 points to give you that will sort of help move things forward. And that is, pardon me, I need some water. Dealing with the aftermath of defeating Venomfang the dragon. This will complete the folk hero fighter's goal. It will achieve the druid's request if they had talked to the druid, and it will help find the location of Wave Echo Cave, because the druid will actually take them to Wave Echo Cave, because he's not going to tell them where it is, but he will take them there. And so it completes that. But anything else, it actually achieves nothing more other than you have defeated a dragon. Well done. It's one of the poorest ways or resolutions to dealing with a dragon. A dragon should be a big deal, and there needs to be some sort of follow-up and major threat, and there's no sort of foreshadowing of the threat of this Venomfang. So unfortunately, without making major changes, there isn't much to it. Now, the treasure in this location is generous, so I would suggest just adding potions of healing if it's needed by any of the player characters. That's my only suggestion for this adventure in terms of treasure, because there's quite a bit here. Now awarding experience points, you can do that for killing monsters, defeating them. Now, defeating them means many things. Doesn't mean killing them. Driving them off, bribing them, or if they flee, right? So a lot of this is the same sort of thing. The players don't gain a milestone for completing this area. So if they complete the Ruins of Thundertree and ask for another level, they don't get one. Now, the only time they would get one is unless the Dungeon Master has turned this area into a major quest location. And that's where we're heading next, because I know that's probably what a lot of people are going to want to do. I recommend actually not running this section of the adventure till after everything else has been resolved, because Venom Fang is a much more threatening main villain than Nesna the Black Spider, and kind of overshadows the Black Spider if you incorporate a dragon. It's just more impressive. So I would recommend don't run this until the very end. If the players get to the Ruins of Thundertree and they aren't level 4 or 5, I want you to consider removing a few things, because it would be pretty unfair. And I mean, I don't have a problem with being unfair, but if you're dealing with new players, it's probably smarter to not include them straight away. So if they're not level 4 or 5 and they come to Thundertree, I want you to remove the dragon and the druid and the cultists. And you can bring them back to this location later on, because all of these monsters are generally going to be respawned, or more monsters will repopulate this location. So it's not like you need to worry about the fact that they killed all the blights or the zombies or the spiders and there's nothing for them to do here, because now you either don't repopulate the area or you repopulate them with something else. Okay. Now, should the Ruins of Thundertree be used as the after the main Lost Mine of Phandelver goals have been achieved, if you actually do this, I want you to increase the difficulty of the Twig Blights. Twig Blights are a boring monster. They don't do very much. I'm going to suggest a combination of the following monsters that will be far more interesting. And you would only do this if the players are level 4 or 5. If they are like level 1, 2, or 3, I wouldn't even bother. You may want to change out the blights for some of these monsters, but not all of them. The ones that I'm going to suggest is the Vine Blight, which is on page 32 of the Monster Manual. It's much more interesting. Its challenge rating isn't much higher than the Twig Blight, but it just does more, and it's more interesting as a monster, full stop. So you've got better chance of actually getting something interesting going on. The other one is the Shambling Mound on page 270 of the Monster Manual. One of those could replace the monsters in a location. I would not use more than one, because Shambling Mounds are pretty tough as a fight. Another one is the Awakened Tree. Now, awakened trees aren't necessarily considered evil or bad, so you can talk to an awakened tree. You don't necessarily have to go burning it to the ground. You'll find that on page 317 of the Monster Manual. I recommend that one highly. Another one that I think you might also find really useful rather than the Twig Blight, and that is the Woodwodes. Woodwode. It's a monster that's not in the Monster Manual, unfortunately. It is on page 198 of Volo's Guide to Monsters. So this is one of those times where you may find yourself having to access a monster that you don't have. If you don't have that book, don't worry about it and don't use it, okay? Unless, of course, you can get the stat block for like free. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother. These are much more interesting monsters than the monsters that are actually presented in this adventure, because Twig Blights, they really do. They suck. And that's pretty much